Lilydale is a tight-knit community of spiritualists located in western New York, 48 miles south of Buffalo, 6 miles south of Fredonia in the hills of Chautauqua County, around the eastern shores of Cassadaga Lake. The township is governed by an assembly known as the Lilydale Assembly. The assembly serves many different purposes, such as regulating the town's economic well-being and issuing business permits, but also spiritualist matters such as testing a medium's ability to communicate with spirits and minimizing fraudulent activity. The town has all the conveniences of American life, such as electricity, plumbing, automobile transportation, and even its own post office. There are very many Victorian-style cottages that are stacked very close side by side along narrow streets that intersect and surround the town. During the summer, starting the last weekend of June and ending on Labor Day, many tourists gathered from around the world to see what the largest remaining spiritualist capital has to offer. And they offer a lot of things that capture interest in outsiders, such as medium readings, workshops on spirit contacting, lessons on Mayan civilization, Native American healing, UFO discussions, and shamanistic drumming, and other topics not related to spiritualism. At the Lilydale Museum resides Ron Nagy, expert archivist who will answer all your historical questions and much, much more. Lilydale, though small, has its own fire department, street signs, and many little surprises for visitors. This documentary will focus on spiritualism, Lilydale, and the implications of technology and tourism.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The belief that the living can communicate to the dead has been around longer than anyone can guess. But it wasn't until the progressive movement of the 19th century that spiritualism began to emerge in America. Western interest began as early as the 18th century with the writings of the Swedish philosopher Emanuel Swedenborg from Sweden. He claimed to have been visited by Jesus, God, and other more minor spirits. In the late 18th century, Anton Mesmer had tried to convince the French Academy that he could heal people with his hands through the energy of spirits by putting his patients in a receptive trance state. His apparent power became known as mesmerism. In places like Puerto Rico, Vivian Garcia practiced spiritism, and she will show that.
There it's called spiritism, and it's based on a different branch of spiritualism that comes out of Brazil and Argentina, influenced originally by France. So their spiritist writers, the one in particular that they follow and translate his work from French to Spanish to other languages, English, since it was the imperialists over South America, American countries, and those countries inform the spiritists in Puerto Rico. That's how Allan Kardec is his spiritist name.
Allan Kardec was a pseudonym for the French philosopher and teacher Hippolyte Léon Denisard Rivale. He was an educator that tried to take a more scientific method to spiritualism. He started a sect called Spiritism, which is heavily influenced in the Puerto Rican culture. This took a very analyzed look at spiritualism, and Rivale wrote many books. first being the Spirits book, comprising a series of 1,019 questions exploring matters concerning the nature of spirits, the spirit world, and the relations between the spirit world and the material world. This was followed by a series of other books, like the Book on Mediums and the Gospel According to Spirit, and by a periodical, the Revue Spirit, which Kardec published until his death. This man helped establish a more scientific view to spiritualism.
And he called it Spiritism. And so far, the only difference, this is what I can't wait to study some more, the only difference is that it's a stricter brand of dealing with spirit.
You mean stricter?
Well, they talk a lot in the work of this guy, Allan Kardec, of developed spirits and undeveloped spirits. Just because you die doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're any better than you were in terms of development to the highest form, to be close to God the whole time, however you perceive God to be, right? Creator, Mother, Father, God, that whole thing. Whatever you perceive God to be, the Spiritism or spiritualism, I'm not sure where I am on it, and I think my job is some kind of molding of those two, melding of those two things. You were created by the Creator, Mother, Father, God. We were all created, all spirits were created, and we've lived and lived and lived, and we never die. And it's all a process of developing the perfection that we are.
In 1844, New York, Andrew Jackson Davis claimed visits from Swedenborg. Davis apparently had healing powers and teamed up with Dr. Silas Leon and two Universalist ministers to exploit his claimed ability. Davis would give lectures in a mesmerized state that were published by Mrs. Ceylon Dodge, who furnished the money. These publications were made popular by advertising Davis's power of clairvoyance. It inspired other spiritualist journals like the Univercolium and Spiritual Philosopher, issued in 1847.
In a little cottage in the town of Hydesville, New York, lived John Fox, his wife Margaret, and their two girls, Catherine, aged 9, and Margaret, aged 11. There was another daughter, Leah, and a son, David, who did not reside in Hydesville. Statistics and books have been written about the subject. There were disturbances from some unknown cause long before the Fox family moved into the house. Mrs. Pulver, who had been the maid for a family that lived there as early as the winter of 1843, said there was peculiar happenings regarding an old peddler who used to call there constantly, and that he very strangely disappeared, and no one seemed to know where. The Fox family moved into the house in the December of 1847, and in early February there were mysterious raps and noises from no apparent cause. These raps finally became so constant that they were annoying. On the memorable date of March 31st, 1848, the nightly occurrences began again. Katie Fox snapped her fingers and called out, "Here, Mr. Splitfoot, do as I do." Immediately, there was distinct raps corresponding to the number of noise that she had made. They all stood astounded. When Katie made a number of motions in the air without sound, this was again answered by a corresponding number of raps from the indivisible force. Then came the words from Katie which have since meant so much to the world, and which were ushered in a new understanding of an old truth. "Look, Mother, it can see as well as hear." What a word of meaning in those few simple words, for it proved to a man that immortality of his own soul, that life after death was an assured fact, and that it could come back and communicate with those upon the earth plane. The phenomenon caused widespread interest from people from miles around that came to hear the raps.
Eventually in 1848 you had the Fox sisters. They communicated with spirits. What came out in the newspaper was the Fox sister communicated with spirits, and they listened to the raps. So people started giving them the nickname spiritualists. That's where it came from.